My first memories of him was lying in a cot at 6 months old, a little tiny scrap of a child. Um, and sort of 13.5 pounds, not very big for 6 months. But we just took to him straight away and brought him home, and we've loved him ever since.
I think back on it and I think, when did they tell me? When did my mum tell me I was adopted? Or when did my dad? And I just cannot, for the life of me, I can't remember. So they must have done it so well. I don't know if they told me when I was 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, but I can't remember the day going, what? So for me, my parents are my parents, and that's the way I see it. I've never wanted to know anything about it. I've never really cared, to be honest.
Well, we told him from an early age that he was adopted. We lived in such a small village that if we hadn't have told him, somebody else would have. And I believe in being honest with children. So from the minute that he was I used to take him to bed and tell him stories about how we went to a hospital and we picked him up, we chose him. And I sort of said chose as a right word.
Well, I grew up in a place called Hentless, which is in Cwmbran, and it used to be a really quiet village at the time. I just remember being really, really happy. I remember like I said, we had a big house and a big, big, big garden. And I just remember it was like playful years.
Jamie wasn't as academic as the other three were, and you just have to accept that he does what he does. Whatever he tried, he was good at sport.
I always like playing outdoors, as a kid. I still do. I couldn't handle doing something 9 till 5 or whatever. When I first started going to school, my mother was like, come on, you got to do this, concentrate on that. By the time I got, I think, to the comprehensive, and it was like the 5th form when I was taking my GCSEs, my parents still really cared about me doing really well. And they wanted me to obviously, do as well as I could, but they knew that athletics was the one for me. I was so keen, I was so into it at the time.
So I took him down to Newport Harriers. He had more or less immediate success in the 100, and that he was running 100s and 200s then. And then, of course, they started asking him to run for the club. And I always remember the first meeting we went to was up at a place called Baulch, which is up the valley. And although it was an Whitsun time, I think, it actually snowed. And I thought, oh dear, I hope this isn't going to be athletics for the rest of my life. But Jamie was committed. He really enjoyed it.
I think that's one of the major reasons why I'm still doing the sport. I think for a parent to be there for their son or daughter at that age, and really being 100% behind them, is amazing. And, it's not, I don't think it's many parents out there who are like that.
Watching the Olympics last year was also very exciting, because that's the first time he'd really made it into the really big time. And watching him run around the track then. In fact, I'm on the floor banging the carpet, shouting my head off.
To be honest, I feel more proud for my parents than I do for myself. I just think, this is for, every time I do well, I think, this is for, my mum and my dad. Because I just think to myself, all the years my mum and my father put in, this is what you're getting out by seeing me doing something which you've always hoped I would do.
I seem to bask in his glory, which I quite enjoy. I mean, everybody knows me as Jamie's mum, and that's how I'm accepted these days.
In Hentless and in Risca Comprehensive, I never had any sort of it was never be any real comments about sort of my colouring or whatever, or where I was from. It's only sort of in the later years, where halfway through the comprehensive, people start saying bits and bobs, and what are they on about?
Now and again he would come home a bit upset because people had a go at him because of his colour. But he soon bounced back. You can't squash Jamie for very long.
Maybe some guy in school who had the ginger hair, or the fat guy in school, they had it a lot worse than me, and which I look back on and I find it quite strange, because you'd always get, where I actually come from. I think I was the only black, or the mixed guy in the school, everyone else was all white, So it was only sort of when I was 13, 14, I started when I started running that down the actual club. I'd encounter sort of like black people. And I got on really well with them.
Jamie has always been very pleased that he's been from the Caribbean, and he likes the Afro hairstyles, he likes the Afro music and things. And he kept threatening to have these dreadlocks put in, and I kept saying, no, you don't want that.
It took me 6 hours in this hairdresser's, and I came home and I walked into this room, in fact, dreading what my mother was going to say. Opened the door, my mother looked at me and went, ah, what? She just said, hey, it looks great. And I thought, oh.
And it was up on his head like a pineapple. And I nearly died. But I got used to it. I had to accept it. And he sort of kept them, and it's been his trademark really since when he was in Australia, running, when he was training and running last year. They called him the Flying Pineapple.
I met Susanna back in 1990. So it was a big shock when I found out that Susanna was pregnant. And it was a pretty bad situation because I just sort of like joined Colin Jackson's group, and I was out in America training with him and a couple of others. And so I was like, oh no, I've just joined a new group. This could be the start of my career, I mean, in a big way. I was so scared about telling my mother about Susanna being pregnant. I told my sister, I said, say it, because I was away. I couldn't tell. If I was face to face, I think I would have plucked up the courage to have said. But like I said, my mother is very traditional, and I knew she'd gone mad. And this was, you know, my mother has never really gone mad on me in my life, I don't think. And I knew this would be the time when she'd flip.
Well, I think like all parents, because of the circumstances, they weren't married. I was upset. Alan was upset. We thought perhaps they were too young. We thought it would stop them doing what they wanted to do.
And they thought, oh no, that's ruined his athletics, and she's not going to be able to work now, and this is going to happen. So it was kind of a tough time.
I mean, when I was growing up in the valleys, it was a real stigma. I mean, you didn't have a baby before you got married. But I mean, things have changed so much in the last few years that, I mean, I'm not saying that I like it, but I've learnt to accept it. Jamie has managed to carry on with his career. He absolutely adores Jay, but of course he's got to spend so much time away from him. But Susanna is there with him, and I think it's worked out very well. We're very proud of him.
We've had to become like my mum and dad have. And it's quite good because I can see what my father has taught me throughout my childhood and my mother taught me is rubbing off on me towards Jay.
Well, I suppose he has to be more responsible, doesn't he, now he's a father? And, I mean, you don't own children. You just have to let them go and do what they want to do, I think.
You know, I know my mum and dad have really enjoyed looking after us. You know, for like, I think like my parents have got to be extra special, you know, because at the end of the day, they didn't have to have me, you know, and for them to bring up and love me like they do to their own is amazing, you know.